Don, thank you so much for joining me. I want to chat a little bit more about this deal that the federal government just signed with the Canadian AI startup called Cohere. This company is one that I'm very familiar with, but perhaps our listeners are not. What should Canadians know about Cohere, and what should they know about this announcement as well?
Well, given that Cohere is maybe playing an important role here, I certainly hope it is. Maybe I'll start by just saying a few things, a few facts about it. That's useful. It's a pretty sizable organization. It's about, I think, valued at almost $7 billion. Its main offices are in Toronto and co-offices actually in San Francisco. It is a multinational, but a Canadian company based in Canada. And let me just say this: it's what's really important here is it's the only Canadian company that really at scale is producing generative AI, and I just mean chatbots, right? That are big enough and powerful enough to do some real work. And we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but that's a good thing for Canada. There are lots of other chatbots in the world, from everything from ChatGPT to Grok to Claude and so on. But this is a Canadian version. Maybe I should just also say that it's been tested, I think, in 37 and 37 different languages. And this company also, Cohere, has a large enterprise platform. And that means they not only have a chatbot, they have a tool, a platform for making it available to business. They specialize in supporting business. And that tool is a pretty sophisticated piece of machinery that will support a lot of activity by large and small businesses.
And I think it's fair to add that this company is a darling in the tech community in Canada right now. And I use that word because I think back to the days of Shopify when everybody's eyes were pointed towards Shopify. I think we feel that a little bit with Cohere. What was just announced, just so people have some context around the relationship between Cohere and the federal government?
Yeah, so the federal government just announced a memorandum of understanding, and it was just signed, I think, last week, if I'm not mistaken. It's a non-binding agreement, and it's really the first step. It's important because for a couple of reasons. But first of all, it's aimed at the public service, and this is very much in Cohere's space. So what the government wants Cohere to do is basically explore how sovereign AI can strengthen services. So this is about looking in there and seeing whether the tools they have, they can provide the public service with ways of using AI to transform how they deliver and use services. And at the same time, promoting the development of digital sovereignty. And again, we'll probably talk more about that. Let me just say this is really important to the government. Everybody probably knows by now that the government thinks it's going to withdraw to some extent from our Canadian embrace on trade and other things, and do it by launching or rebuilding the Canadian economy. And AI is seen as a powerful driver for that. And digital sovereignty means we're not just talking about Canadians' traditional political sovereignty. We want tools, or the government wants tools, that are sovereign in the sense that they are ruled by Canadian law and that they are Canadian tools living on Canadian soil. So our data is living on Canadian soil and operating on Canadian soil. So I think that's a big part of what this MOU is about, is exploring the possibilities, starting with the public service and certainly working out into the private sector and so on, and hoping to begin to ground that idea of expansion of the use of AI and of digital sovereignty, first in the public service and out into Canadian businesses.
When we think about sovereign AI, in a recent article that you wrote, you said, and I'm going to quote you here, a sovereign AI stack must reflect Canadian values. What exactly do you mean by that?
It's a great question. And values here. First of all, people right now, at least particularly in the American AI community, but in the AI community around the world, there's nervousness about values. It makes it sound like, especially when government says it out loud, it makes it sound like they want the AI to reflect the government's agenda. I want to say that the government, or that values and a commitment to values, need not be a handbrake on the development of AI. Indeed, it can be a real asset. And I think we need to understand as well that we're sort of, and that Canada's kind of steering a middle course on this between the two different extremes right now. On one hand, there's the United States under Donald Trump, and they have taken and are taking a really deregulation approach. The idea from the industry is we don't want you controlling our innovation and controlling and slowing us down. Right now, speed is everything. So please get your hands off our industry. And Donald Trump seems quite inclined to do that. At the other extreme, or at least further over on the other side, is the European Union, which has been much more inclined to be concerned about, I guess I would say, the risks associated with AI, the uncertainties, whether it has to do with privacy or whether it has to do with loss of control of AI or all kinds of other things. And so there's a very strong kind of regulatory approach, at least relatively speaking, in the EU. And it's interesting, here in Canada, we may have started out a little bit more in that direction, but this government, I think, is taking a kind of middle ground course. And Evan Solomon, the Minister for AI, has this phrase, light, tight, right regulation. And I'll just take a second to tell you what that means. By light, he certainly recognizes that there's no point in burdening industry, and where things are relatively clear and we think that the risks are low, then we should try to get things on the road. So basically, we should look for safe settings and move them forward. Tight, on the other hand, recognizes that lots of things are not that way. Our privacy concerns over our data, our concerns over essentially the protection of Canadian interests and Canadian data within our organizations like Heritage Canada or Health Canada or places like that are important. And in that case, regulation needs to be firm enough and needs to be strong enough. And the right thing is really to say, regulation should make sense to people. If we can't understand why it's there, then we probably are going down the wrong path. So the government thinks it's steering this middle ground between the two extremes. It doesn't want to deregulate wholly, and on the other hand, it doesn't want to go too far to burden industry with that slows down innovation or slows down investment.
I think it's fair to say that neither of us could speak on behalf of the U.S. in terms of why they are moving towards this direction of deregulation. But as people who are observing and reporting on what's happening in the AI space, it is pretty clear to me that we need regulation. We've seen what happens when there's no guardrails in place around AI. Every single day I wake up, and I'm sure you have the same experience, there's a story about a chat bot going rogue. There's stories about privacy issues when it comes to our data and these big AI models. So what would be the thinking in terms of more deregulation? I mean, this could only in the long term really hurt and impact everyday users and businesses.
Well, first of all, that goes back to what I said about the fact that values are not necessarily a handbrake. They actually can be a facilitator of development. And I think one of the things that's hugely underestimated right now, particularly in Canada, or it's underestimated, let's say it's a wild card, is Canada has one of the lowest rates of confidence in AI in developed countries in the world. And people are nervous. They are nervous about chatbots going rogue. They are nervous about loss of control over privacy. They are nervous about losing jobs. They're nervous about all kinds of things they don't know where AI is going to land. And I think a certain amount of regulation is from their point of view, and I think appropriately, absolutely in order. I want to make sure that my data is secure. I want to make sure that that the chatbots that they're putting on the market are safe and they're not going to lead to AI psychosis or some other thing with my children, and so on and so on. So basically, what I would say is I want to add one more thing that I think is a really important driver for understanding what's happening in the United States. Is they're probably more inclined to be deregulatory than we are to begin with. But there is this other wild card in there right now, and it's China. China is developing artificial intelligence extremely rapidly. They're very competent, very good models, and getting better all the time. And there is a sense in the AI community in Silicon Valley, rightly or wrongly, that we're getting close to some threshold with this stuff. And if we break through to some place like artificial general intelligence, whoever gets there first is going to have a huge leap ahead of everyone else, both economically and potentially geopolitically. And so the argument in the States right now, very powerfully inside the White House and very influentially, is we can't afford to lose this race, and it is a race. And it's not just a race about dominating world markets. it's a race about geopolitical control. And so lots of those people believe, rightly or wrongly, that if they don't move ahead very quickly, the risks are there, but they're going to face a deeper risk, and that risk will be controlled by another country, and that country starts with a C.
Absolutely, and it's not Canada.
Definitely, it's not Canada.
I want to also bring up something that you wrote in the article where you said the public service is Solomon's sandbox. Again, for people who don't know Evan Solomon and his role, he's Canada's Minister of AI. This is the first time we've had that role in place. Talk a little bit about what this move could mean for the public service here in Canada and potentially a more efficient government.
Well, in terms of a more efficient government, and I'm a guy who's been involved in sort of public service reform most of my career and seen this through a number of lenses, including the very early sort of digital tools when they came online and so-called e-government, electronic government. And this is the latest version of that is AI. I guess I would just say this. Certainly, the way the tools are developing, there are lots of opportunities inside the public service to streamline services. We all know what wait times are like. In fact, maybe I'm going to take a flyer here, Amber, and just take this in a slightly different direction. I think one of the things that is hugely important for things like more effective and efficient control and management of organizations, big organizations, that AI offers that's not well appreciated. It's not just about automating processes. It is about that and very efficiently if it's done well, but there's a bigger gain here. When we're thinking about trying to manage and plan and organize and reform something as big as, for example, the healthcare system, it's a humongously large beast with many nooks and crannies and many big rooms that we don't even know what is in there. And what I mean by that is when we try to reform it, we go out and talk to a bunch of different people, most of whom it's like the story of the elephant, where everybody has a part of it. One person has a hold of the trunk and they think you got to fix the trunk, and somebody else has a hold of the tail and they think you got to fix the tail. And nobody's got the picture of the elephant as a whole. AI gives us the prospect. It's almost like an MRI. I'm mixing my metaphors here, but that's okay. It's almost like an MRI, is we do have the capacity to develop a tool where we could look and see inside the system as a whole in a much more efficient, effective, and reliable way so that we could see where the real roadblocks are, where the bottlenecks are, where the things that need to be done. And we could see with a degree of reliability and evidence that will allow us to do diagnosis of the problems and improve those systems much more efficiently. My real hope is that that's kind of the big wild card that we haven't got yet that's close. And it would allow us to start managing those organizations at a whole new level and with a new level of clarity and insight. And it would also then begin to undermine, or I just sort of say short circuit, the arguments back and forth between the guy holding the tail and the guy holding the trunk. As suddenly we realize they're actually connected to something bigger here, and we see how all the pieces fit together.
I think it's probably fair to say that all of us want this to happen. I mean, most Canadians would want us to move in this direction, of course, with guardrails in place. But at the same time, I think there is a little bit of fear around Canada being able to move quickly enough. And I'm reminded of many years ago, back in 2018, I had a chance to interview Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, talking to him about AI and having very similar conversations that we are having now, like Canada can be a leader. We need to adopt artificial intelligence. And it strikes me that as much as we all need to move in this direction, I guess my question is, are we able to do so? And if I can steal sort of three words like the Minister of AI is using and talk about time, tech, and team, do we have time to make this happen? And what kind of time do we have? Is it the right time for the right technology with a partnership like Cohere? And is Carney's team the right team to make this happen? So, I guess that time, tech, and team question is something that I hope is right now in 2025, because clearly we've been talking about this for many, many years. I mean, we're talking a decade or more.
Well, let me say something about the time to start with. I was going to say people may have different views on this, but I'm not sure they do. I think most of the people who are involved in this discussion are pretty much of the same view, is we've never seen a technology move so fast. And it is evolving very quickly. Whatever people say about how long it's taking to manifest and get sort of anchored in business and change businesses or government for that matter, and these things do take time, it is moving very fast. And I'm thinking when we think about what are our goals here, let's remember that our goals, at least with this government right now, aren't just to improve services. They're ultimately to reestablish economic sovereignty. And we see this as a very important tool for where we're going with our future. And if that's our goal, if that's one of our overarching goals, then I would say time is utterly of the essence. And the reason for that is actually pretty simple and pretty brutal, is that the markets aren't going to give us much time. If you look at the amount of money that's being invested right now in the United States through big companies like Google and Microsoft and OpenAI and so on in this technology, both in the infrastructure, that is to say, in the digital, the data centers that will be used to train the tools and, of course, to drive them out and deliver services, and in terms of the models themselves, Grok or Open ChatGPT or whatever it is, we are talking hundreds of billions of dollars per year, moving toward the trillions by the 2030. Like that is a huge amount of money, a huge amount of money. And they are using that money right now to build a whole new layer of infrastructure that by any stretch more than rivals what we thought we were doing with railroads in the 1870s. We are going to build over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years a new global infrastructure, and it's already underway. And sorry, I'm going a little bit long-winded here, but the point is, if Canada wants to be a player in this game, a sovereign player, as opposed to renting someone else's space on their systems, then we need bots. Let's say we need the models, and Cohere has a model, so we do have one there. And we need the infrastructure. And it turns out there is infrastructure being built in Canada, Bell Canada and TELUS and others. TELUS has now announced a $70 billion investment in developing centers. So a stack, what we call a stack is really the number of things that you need to stack on top of each other, the technology, to make it truly sovereign. You need essentially the infrastructure at the bottom, the data centers. You need the tools, and you need the apps at the top. We can, I think, build that. We don't have it yet in Canada, but we have a very limited amount of time before we get swamped by a huge amount of building going on elsewhere, including China. And we only have one company that's building models, right? And only a couple that are building infrastructure. So to go back to your time question, here's what I would say is if we truly think we're trying to build a sovereign infrastructure and we want to re-ground Canadian sovereignty in AI, among other things, we probably have a 3 or 4 year window at most, and we don't have those kind of resources, but we have some. So is it going to work? I don't know. Maybe this takes me to the thing about the tools. And I guess I've already talked about that a little bit. All I would say is we have to build those tools and we have to build them quickly. And that raises all kinds of questions. It raises questions among people who fear that we will move too fast, too quickly, and not regulate properly, or that we don't have the resources, the electricity and other things to run these things, or that they're an environmental risk, or that our models are not safe. So if that slows us down, the window will close. And finally, I guess your question about the team, whether you're talking about the political team or the capacity we have in terms of AI engineers and designers and other things. Canada is smart in AI. We are good. We're small, but we're very good. So we do have something to leverage. And we have a government now that seems to be genuinely interested and committed in doing this. All that leads me to say, and that's what I tried to write in the piece, is I think the government is doing exactly what it should be doing. It's trying to put together a Canadian stack. It's trying to pull it together as quickly as possible, and it's trying to get it out to market. Will we do it in time? Will that be enough even if we do? I think only time will tell. My last and closing thought on that is just to put a punctuation mark on that. The wave that's coming in this stuff is huge. It is huge.
Let's say that the government does get this right in terms of the timing, the tools, and the tech and the team. What about the Canadian public? Because I think what we're seeing right now is that Canadians are worried about AI adoption, especially when it comes to the displacement of jobs. What would you say to that?
Uh, yeah, that's a tough one. I guess the first thing I'd say is we need to acknowledge the concern and that the concern is legitimate. We're all worried about jobs, right? I'm a writer. I'm probably one of the first ones to go. You may find that soon there are avatars looking for your job. I don't know.
Oh, yes.
Uh, but seriously, I mean, think of these people in the public service right now who know that the government is going to try to move in there in a big way and begin to automate and see it as a sandbox where it can experiment. I guess what I'd have to say is this, is that at least with respect to the public service, obviously there are ways the government can minimize the sort of the interruption or the pain that will be felt by things like attrition. They've done it before, and it will take some time, I'm sure, to make the kind of changes that they need to make. And I think an argument that I think is sometimes overplayed, but I certainly have some sympathy for, is a lot of the work that can be done quickly and efficiently is work that is kind of, paper like it's basically automating processes that should have been automated a long time ago. And we can hope that that does free up people and resources in order to do other more creative things or do things better than we're doing them now. And I know I don't know how much you work with chatbots. I do all the time. And what I can tell you is they are incredibly smart, but they are not that creative. And they truly aren't. And they know they're not. Like they will ask you things about how to move to the next step. And so it means when you're thinking about doing things like strategic planning or looking for new ideas, they can help you discuss and brainstorm, but they don't come up with the new ideas. They're really good at helping you fix it, organize and sort them out and develop them, but they're not very good at coming up with them. So at least for now, there's still a lot of space for human creativity and I would say strategic planning and things like that that would allow us to do a much better job. And I'm going to remind you of my little MRI example here. If we suddenly had that kind of information, maybe we could do some really interesting strategic planning with organizations like Health Canada and put some brain power into actually making it work well, rather than basically filling out forms.
I think up until this point in the conversation, I agree 100% with everything that you're saying in terms of the direction that we need to move, the team that we have, the technology, all those pieces, and bringing the public on for the ride, so to speak, for the lack of a better word. But the one piece that I think is going to be a problem is trust. And I know that you wrote an article where you talked about this earlier on this summer, and you said building this kind of trust requires more than technical safeguards. It means treating deep public concerns not as a communications problem, but as a democratic obligation to engage and inform. And this is especially true in this age of misinformation and disinformation and this lack of trust that we're seeing when it comes to large institutions. So, is there any way to repair trust on this path to sovereign AI?
Yeah. I'm a moderate, a cautious optimist here. I certainly think there is. And I'll start out by reminding you what I said before, is that Canadians have the lowest score in developed countries with respect to their trust in AI. So the good news, if there's good news here, is we haven't got much further down to go, right? There's nowhere to go but up. And I would say two things is that, first of all, there's sort of the policy side, I could say, or the organizational side. And that's about things that shouldn't surprise anybody. What people need to see and what we need to make sure we build into the development of AI and its use, whether private or public, with as far as we can in the private, is openness, transparency, and accountability. People need to know what these things can do. They need to know where they're working. They need to know how they operate. And I'm not talking about getting into the guts of a chatbot or some other thing. I'm just talking about basic understanding of how they're being used and what they're being used for and what they're doing, and some idea of how they're being held to how the bots themselves or the AI itself is being held to account. How are we checking on it and making sure that we're overseeing what it's doing? And I think it's critical at both a private sector level and certainly at a public level that there is a deep commitment to openness, transparency, and accountability. I do not see that in the United States. It seems to me going the other way. And I think that's a very worrying development because that will certainly raise questions about trust. In fact, I'm going to throw one other thing in here. Um, there has not yet, thank God, been an AI disaster or catastrophe, whether that's somebody, some terrorist using it to create some kind of viral some kind of terrible virus, or whether it's some kind of cyber attack, or whether it's some kind of incredible rogue bot. But we will see one. We will see one. And when we do, if it's not that far in the future, that's the sort of thing that could have a huge impact on people's level of trust. If they don't think they know what's going on or why this happened or what's being done about it, they may very quickly react very negatively against AI. And that's brewing out there. It could happen. Second thing I'm going to say is that openness, transparency, and accountability are critical, but so is public literacy. I think the government should make a big effort to inform and educate the public on AI. And my own experience, and I'm not trying to speak down to people, is people are not very informed about this, including people who are very informed about all kinds of other things. There are lots of people who are very sophisticated and very active in politics and public policy and so on, who know a lot about government and a lot about policy and a lot about economics, but know almost nothing about AI. And I will add this: most of these people think AI is technology, or the issues are technology. I would argue a lot of these issues increasingly are not about the technology at all. The engineers are pretty good. We can trust them to build it. What we really want to know is what are we doing with it and how is it being used? And I think the public, we shouldn't be trying to teach them how to build a chatbot. We should try to be teaching them to understand what they do and how they impact us and how we can manage those relationships better. The last thing in closing, you've probably heard all this discussion lately about AI psychosis, people extremely worried that their kids and others are getting absorbed in the chatbots, and the chatbots are going rogue and turning into vampires or bad boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever, and that lots of people are emotionally vulnerable on this. That's surely true. I'm not here to talk a lot about AI psychosis. What I am here to say is what we should realize is that we should be arming people with the tools to protect themselves, not even protect themselves, manage those relationships and understand how those bots work so that the bot doesn't become a rogue bot. A lot has to do, it's going to sound weird. It's a lot like your dog. If you don't train it well, it might bite you. And if you do know how to work with them well, they're highly unlikely to bite you.
I want to talk a little bit about the literacy point that you just made, because a few months ago I was at a dinner with some pretty well-known business leaders in Canada, and I had suggested that the government should do more when it comes to educating Canadians and try to improve the literacy around AI. I want to say 8 out of 10 people at the table kind of laughed at this comment and said, you know, this is not the government's job. But I'm probably seeing a bit of what you're seeing as someone who's out there in the public all the time, speaking to people about AI, is that the average person doesn't really understand how some of these things work, and even how to incorporate them into their businesses as well. I mean, look at all the small businesses in Canada that could be much more efficient. So do you think that is the government's role? Is there something tactical that we could do on this side?
I absolutely think it's the government role, although I would draw a distinction here, at least tentatively, between the business community and sort of public safety and well-being. I think it's one thing to say, should they be out there training business on how to use AI and how to integrate it into their businesses? And Evan Solomon surely is dealing with this question. He's expected to encourage it. I think Evan Solomon should be encouraging it and giving speeches, but I think there are lots of people in your business and obviously consultants and others who can help business people once they believe they have a reason to look into it, who can help them understand how to integrate it into their business. And that probably is more of a technological question. So I don't like, I'm not saying the government has nothing to do there, but I don't see that as the government's job. I think our concerns over AI psychosis or AI taking over or losing our jobs or all sorts of other things, that helping people understand how AI is going to how it's already being integrated into our society and how it's going to change our society and how we need to adapt, I think absolutely is a government responsibility. It's about our health and well-being.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to see more happening on that front as well. And it is probably also increasingly my assumption that when I talk about the Canadian public, there are just such a large number of entrepreneurs that I feel like it's, there's an overlap there between the business owners and the average Canadian as well. One final question for you. You mentioned that you are cautiously optimistic. uh, Day to day, are you more optimistic about Canada being able to achieve what we need to achieve when it comes to sovereign AI? And do you think that we will be able to do this in the time that is required?
Well, I think about that question every day. I really do, like many times a day. Um, so if I give you an answer now, if you call me in 5 minutes, I might give you a different one. I'll be really candid here and have to say I'm deeply ambivalent because it is such a steep hill to climb. And what makes it such a steep hill to climb is that the timeline here is very short. Like we've probably got 3 or 4 years, and that we have never seen anything built this fast and this big in history. Nothing like it. And it is so powerful in terms of when we get that infrastructure in place, it will change the way we do a huge amount of stuff. And we're so small compared to some of like those guys are spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year. They will, like just the other day in Meta, Mark Zuckerberg announced that he's building a couple of new data centers. One is two-thirds the size of Manhattan. It's big enough to power, I think it was 5 million homes. Now think about this for a second. This is to train one bot. And now they will also use it for other purposes, but when they train these things, they are using hundreds of thousands, and as the scaling is going to scale to several hundred thousands of these of the chips, and these chips are like really powerful things to build one AI. Um, so I'm not sure. When I think about it that way, I look and sort of say, what kind of resources does Canada really have for this? And it makes me a little nervous. And I would also say the last thing is the competition up there is very aggressive, and especially because big American organizations like Google and Microsoft uh, and others are competing with the Chinese, and they see themselves as doing that, and they want those world markets. They know what's coming, and they want to dominate those markets, and the government wants them to as well. And that means if we're standing in their way, they will certainly try to chew us up very quickly. I hate to be mean and ugly here, but they will. They have their business will be to buy out their competition, and we are a very small competitor. So they'll look at the Canadian market and say, "Do we want that market? Of course we do, right? Of course we want that market." And so, how many billions of dollars will it take to get it? To go back to Mark Zuckerberg again, last couple of weeks, he was recruiting his whole new AI team, and he was taking these people in their 20s. And the highest offer for one of these people over 5 years was $1 billion for somebody in their 20s to come and work for him with him for 5 years. That's the kind of money these people are able to spend and will spend. And I'm not against them, right? I'm not against them. I'm just overwhelmed.
I'm a little against them only because I think they operate without guardrails, and that's at the detriment to the average person who's interacting with this technology. So to me, it feels like the Canadian opportunity is also one that we talked about off the top of the interview, which is to build AI with Canadian values. And those are values of respect and trust and equality or equity. I mean, we can, I think, do that. We just need about a dozen more coheres versus just one. That would be helpful too.
And
For
I
people who
would say
want,
a few very big angel investors.
yes, 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 we need both of those things and probably lots more. For people who want to read more about your work on AI, I know you're writing every week on this subject. Where's the best place for them to go?
They'll find me at National Newswatch. I'm usually posted up there uh, sometime during the week, usually Tuesday or Wednesday. So the column's there, and I hope people will come and read it.
Excellent, Don. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Amber.